So today, lads, we're going to be talking about Sydney Colson, and she went on to Aaliyah Boston's podcast yesterday and talked about the kind of negativity that she received from being a part of the Indiana Fever. And we all kind of know that that's something that is happening.
You are not going to believe what Sydney Colson just revealed. It pretty much confirms what every single person suspected about the Indiana Fever. She went on Aaliyah Boston's podcast and straight up admitted that joining the Fever has brought her more hate than she has ever experienced in her entire career. Think about that for a second. This is a WNBA vet, and people have turned on her for absolutely no reason other than the fact that she signed with Indiana. The negativity has been so intense that it shocked even a player who's always been well-liked across the league. So, the big question, should WNBA players really have to face this kind of hate just because they choose to play for the Indiana Fever? It's wild.
Whether I'm playing, we want things to look like what we want them to look like. And I knew coming into this season, once people started talking, once I was here and experiencing it, like, people had a lot to say. There was a lot of negativity.
So, Sydney Colson, bless her heart, went on Aaliyah Boston's podcast and basically dropped a truth bomb that the WNBA probably wishes she had kept to herself. Coulson just came right out and talked openly about the crazy negativity she received after joining the Indiana Fever, and she definitely was not sugarcoating anything. She admitted point blank that for the first time in her entire career, people actively disliked her. And get this, the only reason was because she became part of the Fever organization. I mean, wow. That's a pretty wild admission, honestly. It confirms everything that Fever players have been dealing with all season long, but most of them haven't really been willing to say it out loud. Coulson explained that she came into the season knowing there might be some attention just because of joining the Fever, especially with all the Caitlin Clark hype, but she was definitely not prepared for the insane level of hate she actually received. She said that typically throughout her career, people have genuinely liked her. She's known for being funny and personable. Even when some people didn't quite get her humor, it was just a difference in sense of humor, not actual dislike or animosity, but joining the Fever, that changed everything completely. Suddenly, she was getting hit with these massive waves of negativity from people who'd never had a problem with her before. It's like overnight she became public enemy number one.
And I just looked at it like, I'm not used to this. Typically, I'm the person that people are just like, oh, we love Sid, that's funny, blah, blah, blah. Some people be like, not funny, and I'm like, they don't have a sense of humor. But like, for the most part, for the most part, people have liked me and have admired me from the outside, but that's never made me do the things I do. Like, I do the things that I do because I enjoy my teammates, because I like comedy, because I like whatever I'm doing, not for other people's approval. So once I got here and was experiencing people's disapproval, it didn't really faze me because I still understood. I think I understood even more so.
So here's what makes her comments so significant. Coulson is a seasoned veteran player who's been in the league for years. She's played for multiple teams. She's experienced all sorts of different situations in locker rooms, all the drama and everything else. She's not some wide-eyed young rookie who doesn't even know what normal looks like. So when she says that the hate she received after joining the Fever was unlike anything she'd ever experienced before, that carries a lot of weight. She actually has a real basis for comparison, and the Fever situation just stands out as uniquely toxic, especially in terms of how fans and other players responded to her signing. Coulson made it crystal clear that the negativity didn't come because of anything she did wrong. No controversial statements, nothing like that. People just hated her for no other reason than her association with the Fever. That's the key point here. She didn't change as a person. She didn't suddenly become less funny or less likable. She didn't do anything controversial or problematic. Her only crime, if you can even call it that, was signing a contract with Indiana, and that was enough for people to turn on her completely. That really reveals just how deep the hatred for the Fever runs among certain segments of WNBA fans, and possibly even other players. It's kind of shocking if you think about it.
To not liking you for no reason, I'm probably exactly where I need to be. So once the injury happened, I'm like, once again, this is something that I don't fully get, but this must be where I need to be, sidelined. And it made me an even more vocal leader. It made me pay attention to things maybe that I wasn't paying attention to that other people had going on, so I could be more tapped into if they're having a hard time and I need to come over here and help them out, whether it's mental, physical, whatever. I had to get outside of me, and that was the lesson that I learned in this. I hope it's the one that God wanted me to learn, but yeah, it was just one of those things that nobody wants that to happen, but you still have to move forward and figure out a way to still be, of service to your team.
But here's the interesting part. It's how Coulson actually processed and responded to that hate. She said that once she realized that people were disapproving of her for absolutely no legitimate reason, it actually confirmed to her that she was exactly where she needed to be. I mean, talk about turning lemons into lemonade. When people hate you without cause, when the animosity is clearly irrational and unjustified, that's often a sign that you're doing something right, or you're in a position that threatens people who don't want you there. Coulson seemed to really understand that the hate wasn't really about her at all. It was more about what the Fever represent, and the fact that the team's success actually threatens the established order that some people are so invested in maintaining. It's like she saw the bigger picture.
We all know that that's something that's happening with all these players. Is like they're just not in any way happy as long as they have to publicly hate the Fever. And the only way you can get back into these people's good graces is by pulling a Dwan Bonner.
And Coulson also revealed that she genuinely wanted to play for the Fever. This wasn't some reluctant signing or a last resort because she couldn't get a better offer somewhere else. She specifically wanted to be in Indiana. She said she liked Kelsey Mitchell and probably had some conversations with her about what the team culture was like. She recognized that she and Caitlin Clark are actually pretty similar as people and would probably get along really well. She saw the Fever as a good fit for her personality and playing style. That just makes the hate she received even more absurd, doesn't it? She chose Indiana because she actually wanted to be there, and people punished her for making that choice. The fact that Coulson had to deal with an injury during the season just added another layer to her whole experience. She actually tore her meniscus and had to sit out a significant amount of time. Being sidelined when you just joined a new team and are trying to establish yourself is frustrating under any circumstances, but dealing with that while also being bombarded with undeserved hate from fans and possibly subtle hostility from players on other teams just makes it exponentially harder. Coulson said the injury actually forced her to become an even more vocal leader and pay close attention to what her teammates were going through so that she could support them better. And that comment about supporting teammates is pretty telling because it suggests that Coulson recognized that her Fever teammates were also dealing with negativity and struggles that might not have been obvious from the outside. She positioned herself as someone who could really help her teammates both mentally and emotionally get through those difficult situations. That's the role of a true veteran leader, and it's exactly what the Fever needed. But it also reveals that the toxicity directed at the Fever wasn't just affecting Coulson, it was actually affecting multiple players on the roster who needed that support to deal with the unreasonable hatred being thrown their way. Coulson's willingness to actually say out loud that people hated her for no reason is really refreshing. Most players kind of dance around that reality. They'll acknowledge some negativity, but they usually downplay it or try to rationalize it in some way. Coulson just laid it out plainly. People hated her because she joined the Fever. There was no other reason. That honesty is actually really important because it validates what fans who support the Fever have been saying all season long. The treatment of Fever players and fans isn't normal. It's not just regular sports rivalry or competition. It's something uglier and way more personal. The comparison to Dana Bonner that gets mentioned in discussions about this is particularly interesting. Bonner left the Fever and suddenly the hate directed at her just disappeared. She was welcomed back into the good graces of the broader WNBA community because she was no longer associated with Indiana. That pattern really reveals that the hate isn't actually about individual players or their behavior. It's about the Fever organization itself, and specifically about its association with Caitlin Clark. Any player who joins the Fever becomes tainted by that association and subject to hate that has absolutely nothing to do with them as individuals. This creates an impossible situation for Fever players. They can't win. If they're successful on the court, they get accused of riding Clark's coattails or benefiting from some kind of favorable treatment. If they struggle, they get mocked for not being able to keep up with Clark or for being liabilities who hold the team back. If they defend Clark or speak positively about the team culture, they're accused of being fake or trying to use her fame. If they stay quiet, they get accused of being jealous or not supporting their teammate. There's just no response that will satisfy the haters because the hate isn't rational to begin with. Coulson's comments also highlight how the Fever have become the most polarizing team in WNBA history. They get more love and more hate than any other team simultaneously. That's actually pretty similar to how major market teams in other sports operate. If you play for the Lakers or the Yankees or the Cowboys, you're going to be celebrated by your fans and despised by everyone else. The attention and scrutiny are just magnified. Every single mistake gets blown up. Every success gets dismissed or credited to advantages rather than skill. That's just the reality of being on a team that matters more than others. The difference is that in those other leagues, being on the polarizing team is usually a choice that comes with understanding of what you're signing up for. Players know what it means to be a Laker or a Yankee. They know the pressure and attention that come with it. Fever players in 2024 and 2025 really didn't necessarily know what they were signing up for because the level of attention and hatred the team receives is totally unprecedented in WNBA history. Clark's arrival changed everything about what it means to play for Indiana in ways that just couldn't have been fully anticipated. The toxic element of WNBA fan culture that Coulson's comments expose is deeply problematic for the league's growth. When players can't sign with certain teams without facing harassment and hate for no legitimate reason, that's a problem that leadership really needs to address. The WNBA should be celebrating that one of its teams has become so popular and relevant that it generates mainstream attention. Instead, there's this weird resentment from parts of the fan base that seem to prefer the league stay small and niche rather than grow behind a popular team and player. Coulson learning new slurs and insults directed at her for joining the Fever is particularly disturbing. The hate isn't just disagreement or criticism of her playing style or decisions. It's personal attacks and slurs that cross obvious lines of acceptable discourse. That kind of toxicity really drives people away from engaging with the sport. It makes the WNBA look petty and unwelcoming, rather than exciting and inclusive. League officials should be embarrassed that their players are experiencing this kind of treatment, but there's been no real effort to call it out or address it. The comment about Lexi Hull also getting hate is another example of how irrational the anti-Fever sentiment has become. Hull is a role player who works hard and does her job. She's not someone who talks trash or creates drama, yet she gets hate simply for being on the roster and being close friends with Clark. That's absurd. Role players on popular teams shouldn't be subjected to harassment just because they play alongside us, but that's the reality in the current WNBA environment, where association with the Fever, and Clark specifically, makes you a target. The fact that Coulson mentioned that she does what she does because she enjoys her teammates and not for other people's approval is the right mindset for dealing with irrational hate. You can't let people who hate you for no reason dictate your choices or affect your happiness. Coulson understands that the negativity says more about the people directing it than it does about her. She's secure enough in herself to recognize that and not let it change how she approaches her role with the team. That's emotional maturity that younger players might struggle with in the same situation. The point about teams not respecting the Fever and paying for it is accurate based on how the season played out. Multiple teams clearly underestimated Indiana, expecting easy wins because they bought into the narrative that the Fever were just Clark and a bunch of role players who couldn't compete. Those teams got embarrassed when the Fever came out and played hard, executed well, and won games they weren't supposed to win. The lack of respect was obvious, and it cost teams wins when they didn't prepare properly or take Indiana seriously. When Clark was injured and out of the lineup, the pattern became even clearer. Teams that showed up and played the Fever seriously won those games handily. Teams that assumed they'd coast to victory without the star player often lost because the rest of the roster was better than people gave them credit for. That proves the Fever weren't just a one-player team, but the narrative had already been set, and many teams and fans refused to adjust their perception even when evidence contradicted it. The social media advice about using the following tab instead of For Your Page is solid. Professional athletes really shouldn't be consuming random social media commentary about themselves, especially the day after games. The algorithm is designed to show you engagement, which often means showing you the most inflammatory and negative takes because those generate reaction. Switching to following means you only see content from people you've chosen to follow, which you can curate to be supportive or at least reasonable rather than toxic. But realistically, asking young athletes to completely disconnect from social media isn't feasible in the modern era. Their brands are built on social platforms. Their endorsement value often depends on their social media presence and engagement. They're expected to interact with fans and promote their sponsors online. Drop a like and subscribe for more reality checks on WNBA business moves.